the book Fire on the Ganges is about this small, marginalized Dalit subcaste called the Domes, and they are the corpse burners in Banaras. They work as corpse burners. And even though they perform this very important Hindu rite of cremation, they are considered to be untouchables by a majority of dominant caste Hindus. Um, and the domes have, they have the ownership of something called the sacred fire, which it is believed that Lord Shiva gave it to them as a boon. And in Hindu society, it is believed that if a deceased Hindu, uh, if if and only if they are cremated by using the sacred fire that belongs to the domes and are cremated by the hands of the domes, will they attain moksha, which is liberation from the cycle of death and rebirth. And so when I began working on this book, I I came across this idea that there is a very singular narrative associated with the domes when I began my research. This was almost a decade ago. And their identity is very inextricably linked to that at the cremation ground. And there weren't alternative informed narratives surrounding them beyond the pyre, beyond the cremation ground. And I was very curious to learn more. And I was also very surprised at the why weren't other aspects of their lives explored? So questions like how do the dome men feel when they are standing near the pyres and they are, day in and day out watching the corpses come in, knowing that this is what the profession is, this is what their life is all about. How does all this impact them mentally and physically? How does a child feel growing in that environment? What is his or her understanding of that death? Do these children have access to good education that would equip them to become capable adults and have opportunities, professional opportunities beyond, their caste-bound professions? And women, I was also very curious to understand why the women were absent from public spaces and whether they had any kind of financial autonomy, whether they had any kind of reproductive autonomy, make decisions for the family. Could they step outside their homes and make a living? So these questions really preoccupied me, and the book really answers these questions. At the same time, against this very rich and fertile historical backdrop of Banaras, which is over 3,000 years old, which has great religious significance to many Hindus, and is also the political, it's also the Lok Sabha constituency for our prime minister. Against this backdrop of Banaras, the lives of the domes unfold, and the book reveals a lot of undocumented aspects of the community as well. For instance, young children who are compelled to work at Manikarnika Ghat, they're shroud pickers, and many of them begin to start cremating the dead around the age of 11 or 12 even, and they get co-opted into the drug culture because they are vulnerable, because they see the face of death every day of their lives. And they consume these drugs not because of, it's a flex or something. They do it because it's a way for them to cope with a very hostile, very uncomfortable work environment. It's a way for them to cope with extreme work pressures, extreme peer pressure, hunger and fatigue, and it's the way they try to survive. Even the men, the corpse burners, they die at a very young age. Some of them die when they're in their early 60s, and this is because of, again, terrible working conditions, extreme exhaustion, dehydration, smoke inhalation. So there are many factors that play into the reason why the domes the men don't survive very long as well. So the book explores these many facets of their lives, and at the same time it tracks the lives of 4 to 5 individuals who um, are refusing to conform to the conventions or societal expectations. Um, and they are navigating this very arduous landscape of gender bias and caste discrimination. And they are trying to take the reins of their lives in their own hands. So the book is many things. So there's this overarching theme of caste that is there, and when we have conversations with people, they will tell you that um, the caste no longer maintains a strong hold in our society, but they're very much wrong. And there are many moments when caste in various insidious ways rears its ugly head. And like when we read newspapers, we come across and we read about these gruesome acts of violence, like honor killings and lynchings. But there are also smaller acts of violence that occur on a day-to-day basis, which often go unrecorded. So, just to give you an example, on one of my field visits, actually quite many field visits of mine, when I used to go from Chan Ghat, which is the Dom Basti, to Manikarnika Ghat, many children would often from the community would accompany me, and they would always avoid one particular route to Manikarnika Ghat, which was, of course, a shorter route. We would always go via the longer route. And over a period of time, I understood why they avoided it. It was because there was a temple there where the priest would often reprimand and shoo the dome children away anytime they were near the vicinity of the temple. And so, as a child, when you're growing up, being humiliated like that or belittled like that, how does it impact you? It obviously will leave immense psychological scars. So, and they do carry those scars, those traumas with them into adulthood. So yes, caste plays a huge part in the book. There's also Bhola, who's one of the protagonists, and when we meet him in the book, he is the only one from Chand Ghat, from his community, who is able to pursue higher education, private education, and he leaves Banaras and he goes to Ludhiana to study. And over there, also, he hides his caste. He doesn't reveal his caste identity to his classmates, and that's not because he is ashamed of who he is. It's just that he's aware of the repercussions that he might face if anyone knows his truth. Because India has this very checkered history of caste-based violence and caste discrimination in educational in across India, in educational institutes, some of the educational institutes. So he is protecting his identity and is protecting himself. So yes, there's this caste. There's also, I think, human resilience is something which my book also explores as a theme, because it's like Bhola, he doesn't let himself be defeated. He continues to pursue his education despite the odds. And there is also Dolly, who is another protagonist in my book, and when we meet her in the book, she's a young widow with 5 children, and she opens a small kirana store just to be able to support her family. And the moment she does so, it stirs a lot of resentment within the community, because this is a very conservative and very patriarchal community, and they're not happy about the fact that Dolly is an entrepreneur, a small businesswoman, because women are not allowed to work outside their homes, or women are not allowed to make a living. And in that sense, Dolly upends the patriarchal order. And um, and so she faces a lot of pushback from her community, and she still doesn't let that derail her or deter her in any way. And we see this transformation of Dolly from this very young and naive and trusting woman into this astute, no nonsense businesswoman. So the book is about human resilience, like strong individuals like Dolly, like Bhola, who are really um, charting their own path. They're not, they're not bowing to caste expectations or gender expectations. They are not allowing their spirit to be broken. They're fighting the odds. And of course, like I said, there is the theme of gender. There's also the theme of death. uh, my book really tries to emphasize and explore the hypocrisy that exists in Hindu society, where the domes, even though they are doing this very crucial um, funerary practice, they are, still condemned to the lowest rung in the caste order. And they're still considered to be untouchables by many people, by many Hindus. And this work that they do is glorified in many ways. If you read my book, you'll understand why. And I feel this glorification is done in one way to perpetuate this cycle of oppression. And for centuries, domes, they have been uh, invisibilized, they have been overlooked, and and it's only when in the time of death does their prominence comes to the fore. And because they're believed to be the givers of moksha. And but death is such an integral part of life. And um, it's just, the book also looks at how children deal with death, how the dome children, just to give you an example, when they go, many of the boys, young boys, go to Manikarnika Ghat to salvage, wood from extinguished fires, and they take that wood back home for their mothers, so that it can be used as cooking fuel. And I remember speaking to one of the dome boys, and this was Bhola, of course. At that time, he was still very young, and he told me that when they used to go and collect this charred wood from Manikarnika Ghat, sometimes the weight of the wood was twice the weight of their own body. And sometimes they would even see pieces of flesh still stuck to the wood. So that's such a poignant and vivid image in my head. Like it breaks your heart that the children are exposed to that at such a young age. um, and they normalize it. I asked one of them, like, when you were growing up, what was your childhood like? What was it like to be working at Manikarnika Ghat? And they said, one of them said that subnormal tha, everything was normal. So for them, it's just the, there are many, many themes that this book deals with. And it really, when I was doing this research, I was surprised of the life that the Domes were living, and I thought it was very important to chronicle their stories. Bola has, he has the book. He has read it, and Dolly, like you mentioned, uh, she has not read it. But when I was doing my reporting, there were I would always tell her what was going to go in the book. We had very open conversations, and it's not only with her, it was with everyone else, whoever I featured in the book, whose stories I profiled. Um, and and of course I told them that I will not be, I'm not going to always present them, or certain stories um, in a light that sort of suits them or their narratives. It had to be a very balanced approach. So they were very well aware of what was going in the book. They were very well aware of the questions that I was asking them. So from that perspective, they know what the book is all about. And in terms of audience, I honestly, I would really hope that the book gets translated, even though it is in English currently. There is a Gujarati translation in the pipeline, but I really hope that Hindi, Tamil, in various languages, the book gets translated, because I really hope it is accessible to the people who want to read. And I also feel that, just to give you another example, while I was doing field reporting, um, the initial days, I remember, because I was so uninformed and a very naive journalist. The initial days, one of the days I went and stood very close to a cluster of burning pyres. And within minutes, I began to feel really uncomfortable and uneasy. And, my ears began to ring. And there was this thick, vicious smoke that engulfs you when you're there at Manikarnika Ghat, if you're standing too close to the pyres. And my head began to throb, and I threw up. And I was almost about to pass out when two corpse burners, they realized what was going on, and they held me and they pulled me aside, and they made me sat down near a tea stall, and gave me water to drink and calm me down. And that was really a tipping point for me, because I realized how excruciating it is to be working in that kind of environment where there's immense heat. It's peak summer, the ground below radiates heat. There's, the fire is fierce and uh, wayward. And as corpse burners, you're dehydrated, you are inhaling smoke, your vision is temporarily impaired because of the smoke and the ash that is swirling in the air. And it's really like, it's it's a difficult and very, uh, like I said, hostile environment to work in every day of your life. And I wanted to describe this. Like, I felt that it was so important to describe Manikarnika Ghat and the corpse burners and what they do in great detail, so as to visually transport the readers, um, to make them feel, if at all, just make them feel what it may be like, that agonizing heat, and the kind of labor that they endure, that they have to do. um yeah, so my audience is everyone. My readership is everyone. I hope people read. It's for anthropologists, it's for historians, it's for the general reader, it's for anyone and everyone who's curious to learn more about the life of the life of people work amongst the dead. What I also wanted to talk about is, like I said, death is such a integral part of our lives. Uh, I've mentioned in my book also that death asserts itself as the last witness to life. And I feel that universally, each community, each culture has their own its own rituals or ways of saying goodbye to its loved ones. And in Hindu society specifically, there are um, a lot of Hindus who would probably be aware and well versed with the rituals associated with death. But many of them will not be aware or seldom even think about the corpse burners, the people who actually perform this very back-breaking, labor-intensive work, and very often this work is not given the respect it deserves. It's not given any value. Um, so my book is really for people to learn more, to understand um, the hardships led by the corpse burners and their families. I mentioned this earlier as well. We have many conversations about, progressive India or modern India. And many people will tell you that, the hold of caste, which supposedly determines one's place in society or one's worth in society, is weakening, right? But really, the one really has to understand that the clawing presence of caste continues to exist in our country. And like the book really reflects how deeply entrenched the caste system is in India. And in 21st century India, the domes are continuing to lead lives which are determined by past rituals and past traditions. Um, and for generations, domes, even though they perform this very important funerary practice, their stories have gone unrecorded, and whatever has been recorded has been solely focused on their work at the cremation ground. Um, and but what about beyond that? How do they lead lives beyond the cremation ground? Um, so Fire on the Ganges really is it chronicles and documents the oral histories of the domes. It's a compilation of their voices, their experiences, and the lives they lead. Um, it's and at the same time, it provides, I think, a portrait of the younger generation of domes who are refusing to um, you know who are challenging the caste conventions and the caste system, who are outspoken and who are ambitious and driven to be much more than what caste or society dictates them to be. So yeah, I mean, there are these really strong individuals who are breaking tradition and mapping their own path.